All right, Steeler fans, second half of the show on Friday, which means it's time for the All Betz Are Off segment with Jeremy Betz. Jeremy, what's up, man? How's it going?
Man, it's going good. It's busy. Last night was the first actual football game. No, it's preseason. I know it's a Hall of Fame game, but hey, it's back. We're back in the throes of things, and it's exciting to be here.
It's crazy how it creeps up on you, man. Like you sit there and it's kind of like that unachievable thing way off in the distance. And next thing you know, you're smacked in the face and we've got football and it's good. And I'm excited. I'm sure you are too, but let's talk about the Steelers as it pertains to their 2024 training camp about a week in. And there's a lot of things to discuss about what we've learned, what we haven't learned, what still has yet to kind of materialize, so to speak. Let's talk about that first. What has yet to materialize? What is something that after a week you still are sitting there thinking, we don't have an answer for this yet, and I'm surprised. What is that? Obviously, Russell Wilson is the low-hanging fruit. Is there anything other than Russell Wilson that you are not yet seeing that you want to?
Yeah, I think for me, what I've been watching is that offensive line and how the snaps are, how the alignments are set and who gets first team reps and how all that's divided up amongst the prospective starters. And I think that it's fair to wonder, at what point are we going to see any changes from the status quo? And I know it's the first week. I know pads just came on. You haven't even set foot in a stadium for preseason yet. There's still a lot of this process left to go. But I mean, none of the incumbents really are having a push for their spot yet. And I think that is something that I'm maybe a little bit surprised about. I thought maybe the Steelers would be a little bit more upfront with, Broderick Jones really, really taking over that left tackle spot. Maybe that's just my own expectations, but I thought, based on what we had heard and some of the things that we've talked about, that maybe the Steelers would give that more of an upfront look, much like Beanie Bishop kind of taking over that nickel cornerback spot in the early portion of training camp here. I kind of thought maybe Broderick Jones would do the same at left tackle. And I know there's a lot of this process left, as I've said, but right now that's what I'm looking at. And that's where I'm like, where are we going to be 3 weeks from now, 4 weeks from now?
You have this whole timeline of February all the way until here we are in August now. And you always say the same thing. No news is good news when it comes to player roster development, because sometimes news can be bad, especially in the downtime between minicamp and training camp. That's really, really bad. In training camp, no news, meaning if you're not getting mentioned, either you're an all-pro veteran and they really don't care if you're out there or not because you're good enough, like a TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, Minka Fitzpatrick. But if you're also not showing out, people aren't even recognizing you, that's not necessarily a good thing. And so when I think about something you said, I was looking forward to these rookies really showing up and showing out. And the two that are getting the most recognition are Troy Fautanu has been phenomenal from everything I've read. And he's gone against TJ Watt. He stoned him on several occasions in their, edge rushers versus tackles. And Jason McCormick is making some noise at guard. I'm shocked I haven't heard Zach Frazier's name mentioned more. I've heard that he's struggled handling the bigger bodies, your Braden Fihokos, your Montravius Adams. And I don't know, maybe you did hear something that I didn't because you have your finger on the pulse, but maybe it's a different pulse than me. I haven't heard anything from Zach Frazier. I was kind of surprised that he's gotten off to what is perceived to be a slow camp.
Yeah, I agree. The only things that I've seen about Frazier that, the coach speak, he's working hard. He's improving every day, 1% better every day, those types of things. But yeah, I thought, again, this was a guy that the mold of a Steeler, right? We heard it all throughout the draft process. This guy's a Steeler. He's the next great center potentially. And you've got a guy in Nate Herbig who has spot started at center, I guess, a spot played at center, but he's kind of holding it down. And he's kind of been the guy that another one of those guys that hasn't really been pushed yet by the next man up. And again, if that's coming, it still may be, but that's such an important position too. And chemistry is such an important part of that as well. So you'd like to see Zach Frazier get out there and, maybe some of this does change when Russell Wilson actually gets out there as the QB1 practicing. Maybe Zach Frazier gets worked into that mix a little bit more. That could play into it. I don't know. I'm not inside the locker room, but it is surprising his name's not mentioned more. I think we've seen I'm trying to think of his first name. I can't think of it right now. Lee, the defensive tackle.
Logan
Lee. That's right. Logan Lee, we've seen a couple noteworthy things that he's done, that he's been involved. And then I think Roman Wilson was the guy that was really getting me excited. And then the injury came, and that's been a bummer. But we'll see him back in a couple weeks, hopefully. And maybe some of that hype can rejuvenate a little bit. But it is interesting to me that the rookie class has been fairly quiet outside of really Troy Fautanu, who's looking like he belongs, according to our very own coach, KT Smith, who was there at practice on Thursday.
That's right. And he's going to have, you can check out his podcast, the Call Sheet Podcast, on the FFS and NFL feed. He'll talk a lot about that. I'm sure he'll talk about it on the Here We Go show coming up with Brian Davis next week. But is there anything else that you feel like you have yet to learn? If not, I do want to ask you about the Cam fight, but I want to see if you have anything else.
I think if I'm going to go on in the secondary here, we were hoping to see a lot of Darius Rush, a lot of Corey Trice, and actually Thursday's practice gave us maybe some insight as to what the Steelers see out of Corey Trice's and his development, playing him a little bit at dime backer in those types of packages, and allowing him to kind of play near the line of scrimmage, in the slot a little bit. I think if he's versatile in that way, that gives the Steelers a lot of depth. But it is interesting to me that you're not hearing a lot about him working in with Dante Jackson as the cornerback 2 opposite Joey Porter Jr., or Darius Rush kind of working in that same capacity. I know they're flipping guys in and out, but Dante Jackson really has kind of stolen the show on the defensive side of the ball. And maybe that's a really good thing for the Steelers. Maybe that stunts the development of a guy like Corey Trice a little bit. But I think when you also consider the type of injury he had last year, a lot of times it's the second year after that type of injury where you really see the bounce back. He's going to continue to grow, and he's going to be a vital part of what the Steelers do on defense this year. But I just think the fact that we haven't heard more about him, about Darius Rush, about some of these younger guys competing on the outside, it's very telling to me that the Steelers brought in Dante Jackson as a guy they want to start at opposite Joey Porter Jr. These guys are going to have to earn every rep they get against a veteran like that.
I think with Corey Trice, it's important to remember that he did an interview with Steelers.com.
Yeah.
And this was after practice on Wednesday, I think. And he said, he's glad that he made it this far, because remember last year's the first padded practice. They really hadn't gotten into anything. He tears up his knee and he's done for the year. And let's also not forget that in minicamp, mandatory minicamp, OTAs phase 3, he was hindered still and they was not fully cleared. I think the Steelers are just playing it safe with him. He's cleared for contact now, but let's also not rush this kid. He's still a young player into the fray. And plus, Dante Jackson has been performing well in camp. So if you have that entrenched starter, a veteran presence across from Joey Porter Jr., Corey Trice, you give him some time, he develops, he's good depth, he can play multiple positions like you mentioned. I think they're in a good spot. Let's not rush this kid back. But I do want to ask you, there's been some chippiness in Steelers camp. Most notably was the big melee, which was on Wednesday. That was when Justin Fields scrambled outside the pocket, and Landon Roberts gave him what he called a love tap, quote unquote.
And grinning the whole time.
And it was two rookies that I already mentioned, Mason McCormick and Troy Fautanu, said, "No, sir." I freaking loved this, by the way.
I do too.
Those two guys, I mean, when you're a rookie, you can say, go back to high school. If you played in high school and you're a ninth grader and you're at the varsity level or in practice getting ready for the season, you're probably not going up to seniors and shoving people around in most cases. That's exactly what this was like. But they said, no, you're not doing this to our quarterback. I loved how, like, TJ Watt, even Landon Roberts said, man, we like to see that. We like to see a little fight in the offensive line. What was your take on that melee?
Yeah, I kind of fall in the same line as you, where you like to see some of the younger guys invested that much in their quarterback, in the offense, taking pride on their side of the ball. And I think when you look at young players, when you compare what the college landscape is like, what the college atmosphere is like compared to the NFL, I think you do get some of these guys that come up and they're ready to make a name for themselves. They want to show that hey, we belong at this level. And what better way to do that than to get in the mix to protect your guy, to get in the mix and say, all right, this isn't going to happen on my watch. And this is a guy we need. So leave him alone. You know the rules, Landon Roberts. You know you're not supposed to hit the quarterback. Come on, man. Let's lay off here. And then, just to it's a room full of alpha men, right? And they're going to do what they do. And I think, Mike Tomlin put it pretty succinctly. He said, we got to be able to control our emotions. We got to be, we want to avoid that type of chippiness, but he's a coach, and I'm sure in the back of his mind, he's saying, this is the kind of passion we want. So it makes sense to me that you kind of let that play out a little bit. You let the dog in each guy expose itself a little bit. You see what you have. And then, Landon Roberts just grinning when he's asked the question, what did you do to Justin Fields? He's a veteran leader on this team as well already on this defense. Yeah. I think he plays a major role in the vibe of this team, in the how the locker room feels. So I think it's a really good sign early on, honestly.
Go back to, it was a Thursday night game, Steelers-Panthers. Ben Roethlisberger leaves the pocket and he's running, and they're dominating Carolina, by the way. And he slides, and I can't remember the safety. It might've been something Reed. He comes up and hits Ben late. And it was a little high, but he slid. And if you recall, David DeCastro and Marquise Pouncey, I thought they were going to literally murder someone on the field.
Yeah.
They went after that guy hard. But when those guys left, when that era, Ramon Foster, even Alejandro Villanueva, when they all retired and went on to their life's work, as Chuck Noll would say, that edge left too. Yeah. And I didn't see it again until it was James Daniels, I think, in Buffalo when Kenny Pickett got hit by, shockingly, I think it was DeMar Hamlin a little bit late. And he went over into the Buffalo sideline and started shoving people. I'm like, okay, here's a little bit of life. Until then, it was just kind of like this offensive line that was, oh, gee, shucks, we're just happy to be here. Now you got to have a little nasty. And the fact that those two rookies did that, A+ in my book. Any final thoughts on that?
No, I think you nailed it. It's one of those things where the coaches are probably like, okay, guys, back off a little bit. But again, like I said, deep down they're really appreciative of the passion that these guys show. And you've coached as well. If you don't have a little bit of anger in your system when you're playing, you're probably not doing it at the level you need to, especially in the game of football. Yeah.
And Mike Tomlin has talked about this. And when I was a coach, I had to talk about it as well. You have to get to the edge. Yeah. You have to have that edge. You just can't go over the edge.
Right.
And that goes back, if I'm going back to these memorable moments, it's the memorable moments against the New York Jets in the AFC Championship game when Marquise Pouncey's coming off the field after almost getting into a fight, and Tomlin's yelling at him, what are you doing, man? This is bigger than that. This is bigger than that. That went over the line. You can't go over the edge. You just got to go to the edge. You got to have it. So I like to see that. Real quick, though, just your thoughts on Justin Fields in terms of first impression. Yeah. Not, Justin Fields went 7 for 7 and all those stupid stats that I talked about in the first half of the show. What's your first impression of Justin Fields in a black and gold uniform?
I mean, it's impressive to me. I think he just comes across as an impressive person. I think from a physical stature, he looks like just an athlete out on the field. You see him on some of the design quarterback runs, the keepers and the bootlegs and things like that. And he just looks natural as a runner. I've been impressed with his bounce back ability. A lot of the reports we're getting is that he's a little inconsistent, but at the same time, for the inconsistencies, he makes big plays down the field. We've seen big throws down the field against this defense, the first teamers in practice. And it's encouraging to me that you get a guy, he's different than Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson's going to take care of the football. Russell Wilson's going to kind of be a point guard back there. And Justin Fields, though, is your shooting guard. He's your big play guy. And he might make a mistake here or there, but he's also going to come back with a big play. I think that's impressive. You see some of the things that made the Bears move on, right, for a generational type talent. And you see where maybe Fields would need to really improve in reading defenses and making his progressions. But at the same time, I think you are seeing some improvement in that. Maybe the Arthur Smith offense is better suited to his skills. I think that that's been interesting too. Seeing him in the shotgun, seeing him in the pistol on play action bootlegs from under center. He's really showing his skill set in whole. Now, all that being said, I don't think he's anywhere close to knocking off Wilson for QB1 or anything like that, anything sensational that you might be hearing out there. But I think he's proving that the Steelers made a wise decision in bringing him in, and that if all else fails with Wilson, you have maybe the best backup option at quarterback in football in Justin Fields as far as upside goes.
I look at it this way. Can Justin Fields win you games if you need him to? And I think the answer is yes, especially if he's in a friendly offensive system that's suited to his skill set. We'll see. But I know you've got a fantasy nugget for the Steelers, a new feature we're doing here on the show. Why don't you lay that down for us?
Yeah, so I was looking at the running backs. Last week, I talked about Russell Wilson, how he had a fairly surprising overall result as a fantasy quarterback. But the running backs, a lot of people discussing who to take, Najee Harris or Jaylen Warren, who's the one that you want for fantasy purposes. And this was a pretty astonishing number for me. If you look at Jaylen Warren in PPR performance, so that's obviously you get a point for every reception you get. He had 61 receptions last year, 69 receptions and 141 carries last year. So you're talking about a guy who had 210 touches and ended up with 196.5 fantasy points. So that comes out to 0.94 fantasy points per touch. All right, 0.94. So almost a full fantasy point every time he touched the football, whether that was run or pass. If you flip the script to Najee Harris, he had 255 carries and 29 receptions. So you're talking about like 284 total touches. On his touches, he had 0.69 fantasy points per touch. So way less effective on a per touch basis. If you're talking about those numbers, the touches coming even more 50-50 in 2024. And I don't know if that'll be the case, but if you're making your bets that way for fantasy purposes, the guy to get clearly is Jaylen Warren based on the production that we've seen so far when he touches the football. It's pretty night and day difference between the two for efficiency. So if you're wondering which one to take, and if you're like me and you feel like maybe Jaylen Warren takes a little bit more of those touches this year in Arthur Smith's tendency to like to use two backs in a run heavy scheme, I think that it's going to be a big year for Jaylen Warren fantasy production wise. I think he's the better option of the two to have for your fantasy team.
Love it. Great stuff. Jeremy, real quick, what do you have coming up this weekend, next week, whatever?
Yeah, Draft Dynasty Podcast, which is the plug for doing the fantasy nugget each week. We're gonna do the AFC West this week. We just did the AFC West. We're gonna jump into the South divisions this next week, and it's gonna be a lot of fun to do that. Steelers Fix. We're going through the division. We're comparing the Steelers roster to each of the other divisional rosters. We went over the Ravens last week, and honestly felt that the Steelers have a better overall roster than the Baltimore Ravens. And we break it down for you there. So check that out. We're going to do the Cleveland Browns this next week, and it's going to be interesting there to see how that breaks down. And then just keep following my stuff on steelcurtainnetwork.com. Going to have several articles coming out over the next few weeks.
All right. Sounds great. Jeremy, as always, thanks for your time, man. Enjoy your weekend.
You too. Have a good one.
See ya.